welcome to this first 2023 edition of the ROPES webinar series. My name is Ben Birnbaum, and I'm the founder and president of ROPES. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, ROPES is a young organization that works to expand the coalition for Middle East peace by connecting forward-thinking Israeli and Palestinian emerging leaders with new allies from across the Arab world. Over the past few years, we've run international summits in Paris and Vienna, a week-long education program in Dubai, and most recently, a delegation of emerging leaders from 6 Arab countries to Israel and the West Bank. Our alumni include members of parliament, diplomats, venture capitalists, journalists, and other change makers from Israel, the Palestinian territories, and 9 Arab countries. This is an exciting time for us at ROPES. Next month, we'll be holding our first public event in the Arab world at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy in Abu Dhabi on February 15th. And in March, we'll be bringing our second delegation of Arab emerging leaders to Israel and the West Bank. So if you're interested in learning more about any of what we do, please get in touch with us by emailing us at info@ropes.org. For those of us who care about the cause of Middle East peace, I think it's fair to say that Israel's election results were unsettling, to say the least. And I think we're all pondering some of the same questions right now. How will this new government impact Israel's already fraught relations with the Palestinians? How will it impact Israel's quest to achieve normalized relations with more countries in the region? And what can we do as individuals and organizations to make some measure of progress toward our goals in spite of the unfavorable political climate? Well, these are all questions we're going to be answering today with the aid of an all-star panel. And to moderate that panel, it is my pleasure to welcome back ROPES' new executive director, Ksenia Svetlova. Ksenia Svetlova served as a Knesset member from 2015 to 2019 for the Hot Nuah faction of the Zionist Union. She was previously an Arab affairs reporter for Israel's Channel 9, who speaks fluent Arabic, and her writing has appeared in Haaretz, the Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, BBC Russian, Al Arabiya, and many other outlets. She has been a director of the Israel Middle East program at the Mitvim Institute and a fellow at both the Atlantic Council and the Institute for Policy and Strategy at Reichman University. Her book, On High Heels Through the Middle East, was published in 2021. Ksenia, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ben. Hello, all. I'm Ksenia Svetlova, the incoming Executive Director of ROPES, and I would like to welcome you all to our webinar, The New Reality for Peacemaking, How to Make Progress in the Face of the New Challenges. Today, we have with us 3 distinguished panelists who I believe among them, they have about 100 years or maybe more of first-hand experience with negotiations for peace in the Middle East, who saw the Middle East in different times, for better and for worse, and who handled the peace process in the most challenging environment when violence broke out in September 2000. At that time, I was a university student in Hebrew University. My major was Arabic language and Islamic studies. I remember watching the TV and thinking, this is the end of all hopes for peace and coexistence. It will be impossible to recover from what is happening now. I definitely was not prepared for spoilers. I was not prepared for an option that the peace process that I was so happy about might fail, and to what will happen if it will. Today, we are facing challenging times again. You might say, when didn't we have challenging times in the Middle East? And this is, of course, right. Yet, now with the most radical right-wing government, the process of weakening of the PA, and the lack of general interest in Israeli-Palestinian affairs in the region and in the world, the future looks quite bleak again. The thing is that for us, the Middle East is home, and we at ROPES believe that the two-state solution is the only way for peaceful agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, and for successful integration of Israelis and the Palestinians in the wider Middle East. That's why we invited today 3 distinguished panelists, Ambassador Denis Ross, Advocate Gilad Sher, and Minister Samich Abed, to share with us their experience to discuss the reality and the ways to continue working for this goal, our common goal, despite all odds. I will shortly introduce our panelists, and then they will have the opportunity for the opening remarks, 7-8 minutes for each. Please, gentlemen, stick to the times. As I used to manage some discussions in the Knesset, I assure you that I'm one fair but tough mediator, and will be watching the times quite closely. So we will start with Ambassador Ross. Dennis Ross is an American diplomat and author. He has served as the Director of Policy Planning in the State Department under President George Bush, the Special Middle East Coordinator under President Bill Clinton, and was a special advisor for the Persian Gulf, Southwest Asia, to the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Ambassador Ross has published extensively on the former Soviet Union, subject that is also close to my heart, arms control and the Greater Middle East, including most recently Doomed to Succeed, the US-Israeli relations from Truman to Obama. He has authored many op-eds in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other papers and magazines. In addition, he writes monthly columns for US News and World Report, as well as for New York Daily News. Gilad Sher, who is also to happen to be a very dear friend, whom I get to know during my work in the Knesset, is an attorney and former Israeli senior peace negotiator and chief of staff to Prime Minister Ehud Barak. He is the Isaac and Mildred Bronstein Fellow in Middle East Peace and Security in honor of Yitzhak Rabin at the Baker Institute, and served as a senior fellow, in the Tel Aviv Institute for National Security Studies, INSS. The law firm he heads, Gilad Sher, Talham & Co., has extensive experience in complex commercial, civil, and administrative causes with national, regional, and international dimensions, negotiation strategy, and representation of leading clients from the business, private, governmental, and public sectors. Sher authored the Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations, the battle for home, the reflections on conflict resolutions. He also co-edited Negotiating in Times of Conflict. This is specifically relevant to our discussion today. And Spoiling and Coping with Spoilers. Well, you know, this is the major focal point of our discussion. Dr. Samih Al-Abed is the Diana Tamari Sabag Fellow in the Middle Eastern Studies at the Baker Institute, and the champion and coordinator for Gaza Vision 2050 in Ramallah. Under the auspices of the Institute Conflict Resolution Program, he participates in the Baker Institute Israeli-Palestinian Working Group, both at the Institute and in the Middle East. Al-Abed heads the Palestinian Housing Council, a nonprofit institution that provides development plans, loans, and other forms of support to help meet Palestinian housing needs in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. As the Palestinian Authority Unity Government Minister of Public Works and Housing in 2007 and Deputy Minister of Planning and International Coordination, he developed planning policies at the regional and national levels, coordinated with the various ministers to put a unified strategic development plan for Palestine before the cabinet, and negotiated with donor countries to establish programs for an economical, viable Palestine. Previously, as the head of the Committee for Borders and Territory, Al-Abed was integrally involved in a final status agreement between Palestine and Israel. In addition, he was a key participant in negotiations during the Camp David, Taba, and Annapolis processes in pursuit of peace and stability. I would like to first start with Ambassador Ross. But before I'll start, I will just advise all of you, please, all of the questions that you might have to our distinguished panelists, please send it to us in the Q&A or in the chat section. I will read them all. I will try to address as much as we can. We already have a Q&A coming to us and being sent to us. So please continue sending your Q&A. We will gather all of them and we'll try to, of course, pass it to the speakers one by one. Please, Ambassador Ross, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. First, it's nice to be with Sami and Gilad, people I've known for a long time and worked with, and I have a lot of respect for both of them. You know, I was asked not only to speak for 7 or 8 minutes, but also to try to suggest that there are historical cases or examples in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations that reflect a similarly difficult period to what we have today. And I would love to come up with examples that would be the equivalent of today, but I can't. And there's a reason I can't. Even in periods that we had, like in the beginnings of the Second Intifada, and even through the Second Intifada, there still was a kind of active American involvement, at least to begin with. It's true, the beginning of the Bush administration, they took a step back, and that's actually when things got worse. And it's also true that there were Israeli-Palestinian security contacts at that time. One of the things that was different in the past, even when we had difficult moments, is that you had a different kind of American involvement than you have now. You had different interest in the region on this issue than you have now. You had different interest internationally on this issue than you have now. There was a continuing Israeli-Palestinian contact outside the security realm, meaning the dialogue that went on between Israelis and Palestinians was also a political dialogue, not only a security one. So the context in the previous periods of difficulty were different than they are now. You look at the difference today, you know we have a very different kind of Israeli government than any that we've seen before, but we also have a complete split on the Palestinian side between the West Bank and Gaza in terms of the PA and in terms of Hamas. The ability to produce a kind of political consensus on either side to engage in a serious negotiation where there could be some kind of adjustments of behavior, some kind of compromises, some kind of concessions, all that is different than what we've seen before. So does that mean it's completely hopeless? Well, if we give in to the hopelessness, then there is nothing that can be done. Ben, what you were saying about ropes, the value of ropes is that you have a constituency here that says, okay, we're going to continue to find what it is we can do, because the idea that you can simply write this off is also something that guarantees deeper cynicism and even less hope. There's a reality here that if we don't find ways to continue to preserve the possibility of peace, this all becomes worse. And the truth is, there's a fundamental premise here that can't be ignored. Israelis cannot wish Palestinians away. They're not going anyplace. And Palestinians cannot wish Israelis away. They're not going anyplace. So you have to find a way to deal with what is a bleak situation. Now, for me, since my instinct is always to look for what can be done, I ask myself, what's different from these previous periods that were difficult? I've outlined, in a sense, what I've said is, difficulties that don't give us a reason to be hopeful from the past and say, gee, we were able to take really difficult situations before and we could overcome them. We don't have a similar context, but we also do have one new development. And that one new development is you have the Abraham Accords. You have Arab states that actually have an interest in building relationships with Israel. Now, the irony is some were prepared to do it without any connection to the Palestinians, at least that's the perception of some. But I look at the Abraham Accords and I look at what the UAE did. The UAE basically said, we will fully normalize with Israel, but Israel cannot annex the territories. And they got a 4-year commitment of no annexation of the territories. Now, I know the Palestinian Authority was very negative about the Abraham Accords. I think, by the way, it's a mistake, because the fact is, these Arab states that have a relationship with Israel then become a source of influence on Israel. They can become also a vehicle for affecting Israeli behavior. You see, Ben-Gvir goes to the Temple Mount, Haram, 3 days after the new government emerges. And what does the UAE do? The UAE basically, representing the Arabs, calls for a meeting at the UN Security Council. Makes it very clear, obviously, that this was not the time necessarily for the Prime Minister to visit. One thing we know, this Prime Minister views the Abraham Accords as his significant achievement. He's not going to undermine it. He wants a breakthrough with the Saudis. It is true that what the Abraham Accords represent is not the traditional historical form of linkage. The historical form of linkage was until occupation ends, there's no normalization. Well, Arab states are not going to wait any longer. They're not going to deny themselves what they see as being in their interest in terms of relationship with Israel. But there's also a reality that if the UAE says no annexation, and you begin to see steps that imply annexation, that will affect that relationship. One of the things I would like to see the Palestinians do is repair their relations with countries like the UAE and recognize that these states that have reached out to Israel, these states that create a connection with Israel also can affect not only the government, but public opinion within Israel. And obviously we see a huge divide in Israel right now, not over the Palestinian issue, but over the issue of judicial reform. The democracy in Israel is alive and well. The public counts for something. Everyone tends to value these relations that have emerged with Arab states. This is the one new element in the situation that gives us something to work with. So what I would like to see is I would like to see more of an effort made to recognize how these states can use their relationship with Israel, number one. I would like to see more of an effort made on the part of the US administration, for example, to do more brokering in this regard. I would like also to be reaching out to these states. Here's where the Palestinian Authority it finds it its own interest. I would love to be able to see a major investment. Some of you focus on housing. I'd like to see a major investment in water infrastructure in the West Bank. I've been talking to the Gulf states about this. This is something where they obviously would have to work with the PA, but they'd also have to coordinate with the Israelis as well. Every Palestinian would notice a difference if there wasn't acute water shortages. We need to be doing things from the ground up of that sort. We need to continue with people-to-people efforts to show there's a sense of how things can change. We need to use these Arab states in a way that also uses their potential leverage. The US administration has to be more active in all these areas as a way of showing something can change. You know, if we start with the premise of hopelessness, if nothing changes except things get worse, well, then there is no sense of possibility. We have to restore a sense of possibility. It's not impossible to do, though, but to do that, you have to focus on what's new in the situation that could be positive and we could take advantage of. All right, I'll stop there since I think I'm approaching my 7 to 8 minute time limit.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador Ross. Just precise to the very second. I will just say, quoting Karl Marx, history repeats itself, first as strategy and second as farce. I think that in our current situation, we will be lucky if we will have farce and not yet another tragedy. And all of us, of course, need to work very hard in order to prevent this from happening. And of course, you have many questions, by the way, in the Q&A sections. We will go to that later on, but many of them are dealing with what the US administration can do now in order to reignite this process and to change the situation on the ground. I would like to now to go to Gilad Sher, who, as I said in the introduction, he had written many books on the how to deal with spoilers. And I said that in the 90s and the 2000s, we felt that we were not ready for spoilers, at least those of us who were not involved in the process, who were just observing it from the TV set. And it seems that now, Gilad, 20 years later, all that we are ready for is spoilers. We are just looking at the situation as one big spoiler. How we can avoid all of this? How we can perhaps, recharge ourselves and find a new way out of this political and geopolitical mess. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for hosting me. The questions you've put are very hard questions to answer. But recapping on your opening remarks, Ksenia, and as well as Ben's, indeed, these days are exceptionally obscure. And I concur with my longtime friend, Dennis, that these are the worst times in the Israeli-Palestinian context, in the Israeli-Palestinian arena, which not...
Gilad, we do not hear you.
You cannot hear me now?
Yes, this is fine now. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Where did I lose you? I believe that we need to initiate hope because the problems and the core contentious issues will not disappear just like that if we do not deal with them. And we face nowadays in Israel a systemic offensive against the judicial system, against the law enforcement bodies, the Supreme Court, the liberal media in Israel, the freedom of speech. And for us, Israeli liberal patriots, the offensive of Netanyahu's government against the fundamental values of Israel is equal to no less than Pearl Harbor for Americans. And how is all this related to our topic this evening? Let me give you an outlook. There is an orchestrated delegitimization of groups and individuals who are part of Israel's peace camp. We undergo a virtual carpet bombing combined with targeted killing of civil society and human rights organizations, politicians, public figures, individuals who support and agreed upon long-term political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the hope for change and for an Israeli-Palestinian coexistence initiative no longer has any place on the public agenda. You know that very well, Ksenia. This incitement against people like us who are seeking a long-term, not even a full-fledged resolution, but a long-term resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it has reached a level of demonization of people like us. And like a mirror image, I'm sure that Samir, my friend, will talk about it later. A mirror image of the Palestinian society, the Israeli society has heavily shifted against peace building rightwards. And still, I believe that albeit all these, the two states for two people is still the best solution for an Israeli-Palestinian future. It is extremely challenging to see that throughout the current reality between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. We speak about 15 million people altogether, whose future looks rather gloomy. However, if we don't deal with the occupation and its consequences, if we don't deal with the resolution of the conflict, if we abandon the arena for the continuation of the incremental annexation process, then, what we have on the one side, and with a dysfunctional Palestinian governance and an ultra-right Israeli leadership, all roads lead to a de jure annexation of the West Bank. And this comes after decades of de facto annexation of part of these territories, and such eventuality would lead to the loss of the identity of Israel as a Jewish democratic state, which will bury the Zionist enterprise and will be a disaster for both us and the Palestinians, who will not get any kind of self-determination ever if we go that way. So what needs to be done, if you ask me tonight, ultimately, we need to promote a process of gradual, responsible, and continuous separation from between Israelis and Palestinians, the ones from the others, thereby ensuring the future of Israel as a Jewish, democratic, secure, and egalitarian state, all while respecting the Palestinian right to self-determination. And all these issues require political and societal willingness, which is completely absent from the stage currently. It requires courage, leadership, national responsibility, also not very much present currently. The ultimate vision of a two-state for two people reality, even not even an agreement, but reality, it might be attainable throughout a series of transitional phases, interim agreements, perhaps independent steps also that are constructive, compliant with continuous regional and multilateral and bilateral dialogue processes or negotiation processes. It is very clear to all of us here on the panel that there are no bypasses and no shortcuts to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict resolution. The terminology of conflict reduction is a language laundry aimed at continuing the tacit annexation. And Israel currently walks, in my opinion, blindfolded down the road for a one-state reality. its indifference to the ramification of the so-called status quo, imitates like a mirror image the policy of historical three no's of the Arab world at the Khartoum Conference of 1967, no to peace, no to recognition of a Palestinian state, and no to negotiations with representatives of the Palestinian people. And I'm sure that we will talk about the US role in all this, but the US role must be first and foremost hands-on, and not sometimes hands-on, sometimes hands-off, etc. They should be very much more proactive in at least imposing a kind of a process on the parties, at least to see them speak to one another, and of course stop the deterioration towards a one state reality, and preserve and even promote the preservation of the conditions for an eventual two-state for two people solution. We'll talk in more details, but I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Gilad. Not very optimistic, but very sincere and realistic view of what is happening right now at our end. And yes, everything is interconnected, of course. The internal Israeli affairs, the attack against the judiciary, and many other so-called reforms, and of course, the complete stall of the peace process with the Palestinians. Dear friends, I will just want to remind you, we will already have a lot of questions in the Q&A sections, but I encourage you to send more. I promise to get to as much as possible of your questions and address them to the speakers. Now, I just wanted to tell you a short piece of trivia about Gilad Sher. You probably saw on Netflix the Chernobyl series, wonderful Chernobyl series about the nuclear reactor that blew up in Soviet Union, 1985. So for you to know that Gilad pro bono represented the group of Chernobyl liquidators and survivors in Israel for many years, and perhaps still, Gilad, I don't know if you continue doing that, but this is something that I think that some of you, it will be interesting for you to know. I would like to go now to respected Minister Samih Al-Abed, and Samih, I would like perhaps to make a bridge between what Gilad said to you, again, about the American role, of course, but also about the regional role. Because I think that we heard after the Abraham Accords from the Palestinian side a lot of criticism towards the Arab states, and it seems that perhaps some opportunity was missed to use the leverage that is now created from the part of the Arab states on Israel that wishes to continue with the Abraham Accords, that wishes to expand them. And as Ambassador Rose correctly said, Netanyahu it's part of his legacy. He doesn't want to give it up. So do you believe also that this kind of pressure, influence can be used on behalf of the Arab states, Arab leaders, in regards to revival of the negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians?
Thank you very much for hosting me, and I'm glad to be with the two gentlemen that we know each other for a long time. Unfortunately, this is a sad day for us here in the West Bank. More than 10 people were killed, and this month over 30 people were killed in the West Bank. So before I answer those questions, or to get to those questions, I would like to give you what is happening here. What do we think as Palestinians of all the things that is happening here? For us Palestinians, there is no new reality with this government. In reality, what we see is the continuation of policies that come from previous administration. While the continuation of the same sort of policies and previous governments, the new government is poised to introduce more extreme and concrete policies, which is if fully implemented, risk causing irrevocable damage to the prospects of these based in two states. Israeli culture of impunity has incentivized as such maximalist policies. These policies are backed by decades of systematic violations of international law that have passed without any consequences or repercussions. Those on the far right have argued international law and norms of the international system are irrelevant consideration. They now rejoice with the current situation. Let's be clear. In Israel today, there is no two-state solution plan. It's not there. The split is between those who seeking to manage the status quo, such as Lapid and Gantz, and those trying to further move forward with annexation, like Netanyahu, his Likud and right-wing allies. There are those who want to make Netanyahu look like a moderate in the current situation, that he will be there to provide a counterbalance to the extreme position of Smotrich and Ben Gvir. This is not only an inaccurate portrayal of reality, but also insulting to the millions of Palestinians who have been victims of his policies of colonial settlements expansion. This has happened with him since the 90s, when he first became a prime minister, a goal that he has finally managed to achieve. In short, for the Palestinian people, whether under occupation or exile, there is no fundamental change of policies, but a radicalization of existing policies. For example, the colonial settlement expansion, even with the previous government, with the Lapid government, as maybe Gilad knows that Givat Hamut was built there. The racist laws against Palestinian citizens of Israel was passed with the Lapid government. The strengthening the ban on the Palestinian family reunification and other issues. No return to the negotiation position that Dennis, Gilad, and others they used to negotiate from. Even those who claim to support the two-state solution, in theory, are openly against negotiating over the minimum requirements of a sovereign state of Palestine to exist. That is why, when we asked to deal with a new reality here, I wanted to challenge you with such thoughts, because today tens of thousands of Israelis are in the streets demonstrating. They are doing so loudly to safeguard their own privileges, rather than to ensure that there is freedom, equality, and justice for all. Least for all for the Palestinians. We are dealing with a situation on the ground where the Oslo peace process is no longer a reference point of Israel-Palestinian relations. The deepening Israeli occupation and its non-stop settlement expansion has done everything possible to weaken the Palestinian Authority and its ability to govern even in the limited spheres set out in the interim accord, taking successive steps toward annexation that go against the spirit. Even though I know that Dennis said that they stopped the annexation, in fact, it's going on by building more in the settlements that never stopped there. So this has led many people in Palestine, including in all political parties and movements, to question why the Palestinian government and its leadership should still consider the Oslo Agreement as a reference point. In other words, why we are going to be the only party to respect the agreement. The question is even broader, as Palestine seems to be not just the only party to respect the Oslo Agreement, but is the only party still working for a two-state solution. The latest vote in the United Nations seeking an advisory opinion for the International Court of Justice shows that 2/3 of the European Union, in addition to the United States, were not in favor of this very simple step. But then the Palestinians supposed to do in order to achieve freedom, if all other avenues are closed off. In many international circles, the Palestinians fear opposition to all possible strategies. There is no opposition to armed struggle. There is opposition to armed struggle. There is opposition to boycotts. And there is opposition to any kind of sanctions on Israel. There is opposition to recognize the state of Palestine. There is opposition to our membership in the United Nations. There is opposition to seek the opinion of the International Court of Justice over anything. So what is it that the United States and other Western powers are willing to support for Palestinian freedom and to end the Israeli occupation of our land? Some have been distracted by the Abraham Accords, like this is what he said, and vague ideas, talking points, suggesting that by advancing Arab-Israeli normalization agreement would open up the space for Palestinian-Israeli talks. This has been proven not to be the case, Rose. Instead, while the opposition has happened, for Palestinians, the Abraham Accord have resulted in More radicalization, Israeli position culminated in the current government, the removal of key incentives for the Israeli public to support the peace process with Palestinians, and unstoppable annexation process and openly racist political discourse. But these accords have only been concluded with governments only and have given Israelis a false sense of comfort and acceptance by the Arab people in spite of their flagrant mistreatment of Palestinians. If anyone has no doubt about how the Arab state feels about normalization, since some people claim to care a lot about democracy and public opinion, they may want to ask Israeli journalists to attend the World Cup in Qatar. In summarizing, there is a reality of annexation and a consensus in Israel about not moving for peace, while Western powers and most Arab states are not taking any measures to curb the occupation, to create incentives for restarting the peace process. So the question, where is the Palestinian National Movement in all of this? There is a need to give some context. When we agreed initially and decided to move in favor of peace process, it took a major risk, and it's paid the price through the consequences on the ground today. When Israeli politicians realized that the peace process could in fact lead to a two-state solution, or that the international community was dragging them towards such an outcome, they quickly moved to reverse whatever the Oslo Agreement had given to the Palestinians, making sure that the process of annexation keeps moving forward and that Israeli control over the Palestinian people would be perpetuated. This was post-Rabin fallout and the agenda and the for legacy for Netanyahu. Today, this puts the Palestinian leadership in a situation where only tough decisions can be made. And you heard this a few hours ago, that they stopped the security coordination and other issues, which means most Palestinian decisions should go in the direction of mobilizing our nation to resist the Israeli occupation and all attempts to perpetuate the system of apartheid. But when the Palestinian leadership tries to resist through non-violent tools, such as going to the ICJ, it doesn't receive international support. In some important respects, it receives the opposite. This needs to be changed. The question here is not about what is going to happen the day after Abu Mazen. The question is now, what should be done now in order to prevent a further disaster from occurring? And the answer to that question is not about trying to be creative. Perhaps those who pushed for concrete measures after a few days of Russian occupation, of Ukraine, may want to say something about over half a century of Israeli occupation of Palestine. Not take an action, avoiding any kind of measures, is not just an act of complicity with an Israeli government that has already stated its political program, a strong commitment to colonize, settlement, expansion, annexation, and apartheid, and no need for the Palestinians for natural growth. They won't give us anything to enlarge our cities or villages.
I just have to notify you that your 7 minutes are over. Please go to your.
We have, in spite of all what I said, I insist that despite adherences and despite all the odds and actions against it, the two-state solution is still alive and will remain so regardless. With enough political will, it can always be salvaged. I agree with some of those comments. What needs to be done in order to save this? We are through at the very difficult time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Abed. We have many questions. I wanted to go to the first round of my questions to all of our panelists, but I will give it up so we can have enough time for the wonderful questions that were sent to us. I will try to group them and address them specifically to one panelist or to two panelists, so we will save time and end our webinar just in time. So the first question is coming from Nimrod Novik to Ambassador Ross. How would you wish to see Secretary Blinken handle his forthcoming visit to Israel and other stops in terms of public diplomacy and private messaging. And I will add to Ambassador Ross another question that we have, how we can use the example of utilizing economic situation between Israelis and UAE as a success example to be capitalized on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, taking into account the new extreme right government in Israel. Please, Ambassador Ross.
All right, so there's actually two quite different questions.
Yep.
On the latter one, I would say, I'd come back to something I was saying earlier. I would like to see a Palestinian dimension to this. Look, the UAE is investing in Jordan to permit Jordan to create renewable energy, which they will sell to Israel, which Israel will then provide water to Jordan. Why not comparable investments in the West Bank that could produce similar arrangements, three-way arrangements between the UAE, the Palestinians, and Israel? You know, part of the reason is because of the Palestinian reaction to the Abraham Accords. You know, if you, rather than simply being critical of the UAE, and I understand, Sami, I understand why there's a Palestinian reaction to it. I understand it. But the fact is that all it does is ensure that the UAE won't use some of its wherewithal to be helpful to Palestinians. So, you know, you're not going to change the reality of the Abraham Accords because Arab states see something to be gained from the relationship with Israel and things that matter to them. But the Palestinians shouldn't be left out of that. So my answer on the second question is think about ways to create three-way kinds of investments, similar to what we saw with the UAE, Jordan, and Israel. On the first question, I think it's important, I think, for Secretary of State Blinken to emphasize again that the US believes in a two states for two peoples outcome, and that a one-state outcome serves neither interest. It doesn't serve the interests of Israelis because it means the end of a Jewish democratic state. It doesn't serve the interests of the Palestinians for reasons that Gilad said, because ultimately you are suppressing a Palestinian identity in a one state. For me, the reason I want him to emphasize this as a theme publicly, because that's what Nimrod is asking. I want him to emphasize it as a theme because there's too little attention given to the consequences of one state. You know, somehow each side can look at one state and think, oh, it'll serve our interest. No, it doesn't. Because look at the Middle East. The Middle East and the world more generally is not in a post-national identity phase. National identity is basically still the fundamental source of how people see themselves. And when you try to suppress national identities, you're going to produce an explosion. You know, I'll never forget, one of the Ahmed name, someone who somebody knows well, at one time gave a public presentation where he said, look, in one state, either they will try to control us or we will try to control them. Look around the Middle East, wherever there's more than one national identity, sectarian identity, or tribal identity, that state is at war with itself or completely paralyzed. That is not the future that either Israelis or Palestinians should want for themselves. So in answer to Niran's question, I would say, I would like the public diplomacy part of the Blinken mission to emphasize that two states for two peoples is the only long-term answer to the Israelis and Palestinians, and a one-state outcome is a prescription for an enduring conflict. That's what I'd like to hear him say.
Thank you very much. Two questions to Gilad Sher. As you used to be the attorney of the government, how legal the current situation toward the Palestinians, the attacks, the Palestinian civilians, and do you believe that anything can be positive towards peace that can take place during this period of the Israeli government? This is first. The second one is about the US, the question that was sent by Martin Raffel. Can the US advance the Palestinian issue in the context of Abraham Accords if there is no political will in Jerusalem and Ramallah? Please be brief. I know that there are tough questions. Gilad, please.
Okay, so first in terms of the legality of the situation, I don't think that this is our problem. I think that our problem is that we have three very big spoilers that we face, and these are: number one, leadership; number two, security; and number three, public support. And if we are on the verge of a third intifada, which will rise again with violence and terrorism and retaliation and so on, I don't know. Maybe Samir has the answer. I don't know, but I think that what the United States could do in order to avoid that deterioration or that escalation is to not allow Israel currently to do anything that negates the partition, the possible eventual partition of the land into two nation states sometime in the future. And I think that on the positive side, they should promote some activity between Israel and the Palestinians within the regional context of the Abraham Accords that we need to capitalize on, because the regional dimension has not been exhausted up to now in order to try and provide some other trade-offs that are absent in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation only, the bilateral stage. The regional stage, the regional dimension provides a lot more opportunities to tackle also issues that are not exclusive, but mostly within the Israeli-Palestinian context. And we have to try to break through this gridlock of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict only, and try to find within the regional context other solutions to the long term and to the immediate term as well.
Thank you very much, Gilad. Now two questions to Dr. Abed. The first one is by Phyllis Fritzen from the media line. As we are listening to you, Dr. Abed, President Abbas is about to announce severing security relations with Israel, as Israel went into Jenin to thwart a terrorist attack this morning, and 9 Palestinians were killed. Do you believe there is any chance to turn the tide and bring Israelis and the Palestinians back to the table? This is one. And there is another one also addressed to you. Okay. Why do you speak as if all Palestinian Muslims are united under the PA? Is this true? If yes, why doesn't Abbas travel to Hebron or Nablus to speak with the sheikhs from the city about how to project a united front for peace? This is a question from Lee Snitzer. Please be brief. The floor is yours, please.
Okay, for the first question, we've been asking for a long time for not the incursion, not to killing people every single day, and that's the security arrangement with the Israelis became a burden on the authority, because most people, they think that they are helping them by more incursion in the cities and everywhere. And so many people were killed. And the authority tried their best in order to tell the Israelis to stop doing this and come up with on the table to start to talk about how to solve the problem. What is happening now? Some people start to talk about how to manage the conflict. And some of Palestinians say, okay, managing the conflict with the support and help of the security apparatus in Palestine, it means that the Israelis are not willing to give us anything. I mean, they are relaxed. So what is happening there? So yes, there is a matter that people can get back to the track if the United States and other Arab countries can interfere in order to stop all this. This month only, 30 people were killed. So what is happening here is the authority is, for some people, became irrelevant. You know, even the United States, they said, we want to give support to the Palestinian Authority. What kind of support the Americans are giving us now? You know, they're giving some sort of money for civil society. And civil society, for people to people, we started this in 1995. And the output of this, that more radicalism in the Israeli side and more radicalism on the Palestinian side. And nothing for the infrastructure and how to preserve the two-state solution. We want the Americans to interfere in how to preserve the two-state solution, to give their money for the infrastructure, like Dennis mentioned before, within the Arab period, within the Arab support, and this can create some movement in the ground that gives hope to the people that there is something coming to their side. But with this current situation, with the announcement of this government of what they wanted to do, and they started already doing what they promised to do, and this is happening before Blinken visit to the region. And I don't know what will happen after he leaves. You know, the usual, they might announce expansion of another settlement or building another settlements. So the position of the United States is not helping us at all, neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis. We want a strong involvement from the United States and from even the European countries. A standstill like this and the status quo is not enough for us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abed. We have two more questions to Ambassador Ross. One from Ambassador Alan Solomon. Do you think it's wise for President Biden to welcome PM Netanyahu at the Oval Office at this time? What sort of message will it send? There is another question to all panelists from Arkady Mazin. What could possibly reignite Israel's interest in a peace agreement other than a major burst of violence or serious external pressure? We don't have much time, but please, Ambassador Ross, and I hope to have still an opportunity to address a question to Gilad and also another question to Dr. Abed. Please.
So look, the answer to the question is yes. I still think the president should see Prime Minister Netanyahu. There are a variety of issues, including Iran, on which there needs to be an understanding to the extent possible between the United States and Israel. And by the way, I would imagine that the president will say to the prime minister, if you want to have a strategy where we can keep all of the attention riveted on Iran, so we can isolate Iran, so we can justify whatever actions may be needed, not just economic, but possibly military as well, if Iran continues moving towards a nuclear weapon, which they are in fact moving towards, he would in all likelihood say to the prime minister, we can't have actions by this Israeli government that turn the attention away from Iran and make it easy for Iran to try to shift the attention onto Israel. So there is a relationship here between what can be done vis-a-vis Iran, what the prime minister wants in terms of a breakthrough with Saudi Arabia, and what happens with the Palestinians. So it's not, as I said earlier, it's not the traditional concept of linkage, because no Arab state is basically going to say, we're not doing anything until the occupation is ended. They're just not going to do that. They've decided they have a set of interests in there. Sammy, I hate to say this, but you know it as well. They don't believe the Palestinian leadership is capable of taking steps that they should take, whether it's on the inside or even towards the Israelis. We can discuss that, but that's their perception. So they're not gonna sit back and basically do nothing with the Israelis when they see it in their interest. On the other hand, they're not indifferent ultimately to the Palestinians, and obviously they represent a source of influence on Israel. When you have a prime minister whose two most important strategic priorities are Iran and Saudi Arabia and preservation of the Abraham Accords, because that was his achievement, that creates a lever, that creates a potential for influence. It's just not being used, and it needs to be.
Okay, thank you very much. Gilad, very briefly, what could possibly reignite Israel's interest in a peace agreement other than a major burst of violence or serious external pressure? And there was another question about external pressure, for example, the weapon and other military support that Israel receives from the US. Your thoughts?
Both can work, but we have to keep in mind that it does not always work the way we want it to work. External pressure, sometimes it does exactly the opposite of what we hoped for initially. I would like to leave some time for Samir to speak as well. So I will only for closing my remarks, I would only say the following. First, that the conflict can be resolved and should be resolved, and this is something that we have to keep in mind all the time. And I would like to quote Prime Minister Menachem Begin, who said to President Sadat in November 1977, I quote, "We have learned from history that war is avoidable. It is peace that is inevitable," unquote. Thank you.
Thank you for ending this webinar with a little bit of hope with this great quote, Gilad. Dr. Abed, I have the last two questions for you. First, it's about the decision of the PA to stop the security liaison with Israelis. The second question is, if peace talks were to be renewed, how could the problem of Hamas rule in Gaza be solved? Please, the floor is yours, but very briefly, we need to go to the end already.
I'm not going to talk about what is happening between Hamas and the authority here. I'm concerning about what is happening here in the West Bank and in Gaza as well. And I would like to say that the decision that was taken today, I think the PA was enforced to do something, because what is happening every day is not comfortable for them. I mean, it's better for them to leave and not to stay. And this is what this government of Israel wanted to do. They want them to dismantle the Palestinian Authority, and they want to do all action in order to create this kind of problem. So we have with Arab countries, with the Americans, with the Europeans, to work together in order to stop this action that is taking place in the West Bank here. And then after that, as you can see today, I hear that Hamas was not involved, or they don't want the jihad to be involved in any throwing rockets or to be involved with this, which means that there is a hope that there is something can be done within this context. If the United States can work in the real world and can provide the Palestinian Authority at least something that they can work with, and also the Arab world. Dennis, you are asking wanted the Saudi Arabia to be involved within the Abraham Accords and others. But why, the question to us, why there is a Western obsession with granting Israeli normalization with the Arab world, while an apartheid regime continues being imposed on the Palestinian people? Encouraging normalization. What is wrong with the Arab Peace Initiative? We would like the Arab Peace Initiative is the overall peace that was initiated by the Saudi Arabia in order to come to the table and for other countries in the Middle East to join for peace while solving the problem of the Palestinians. So why not encouraging the Arab Peace Initiative to take place and to be the umbrella for the Abraham Accord and others? That's one thing. The other thing, for even those who were involved in the Abraham Accord, why don't they come and invest in the West Bank in order to preserve the way for the two-state solution and to help us for doing that? And why the United States is not helping the PA in any word except given from the USAID only to the civil society, which is, I don't know if it is the output of it is good or not, but so far it doesn't mean anything. It's a waste of money and the taxpayers' money in the United States. You have to have a concrete project development in Area C in order to provide the way for the establishment of the state of Palestine if everybody is interested in having two-state solution.
Thank you very much for your insights, Dr. Abed. Certainly a lot of issues to consider before the Blinken's visit to our region. And while we might not know all, I'm sure that at least some of what we discussed here today will be on the table. I would like to thank our panelists. You were unbelievable. It's the team that I would want to see now, having the negotiations at this very second. I thank you all for joining us today, and an added thank you for many of you who make our work possible with your generous support. As Ben mentioned at the start, we have a very busy schedule over the coming months that includes the event next month in Abu Dhabi and a delegation of emerging leaders from the Arab world to Israel and the West Bank that we are bringing them in March. Finances permitting, we are hoping to bring 3 additional such delegations over the course of 2023 to make these young leaders familiar with the situation on the ground, so they would be able to see by their own eyes what is happening in the West Bank, what is happening in Israel, to talk to people and to meet perhaps even some of our panelists here today. So if you would like to learn more about our work in ropes or support it with a tax deductible contribution, you can use one of the QR codes on your screen. I again thank you very much for your attention. I am saying goodbye, shalom, salama, litraot to all of you, and hope to meet you soon again in our next webinars of ropes, the series of webinars that we launched a few months ago. Thank you very much and goodbye.